Welcome to Chase Oaks Live. Thank you so much for joining us. You've actually caught us in between our services. We broadcast every Sunday at 9:25 and at 11:10, and I just want to personally invite you to join us for that experience. Actually, the little box next to the video screen, I'm not sure which way it is. There's a spot where you can see our schedule, and you can click an invite button. You can invite yourself. You can invite anybody else you'd like to experience our live online services. So I want to encourage you to do that. But since you're here, hey, why don't I give you an example of what the typical Sunday experience at Chase Oaks is all about. So what I'm going to do is I'll play you a worship song, and then maybe play you another song and let you hear a message from our senior pastor, Jeff Jones. My name is Todd, by the way. I'm our online pastor. There's also a button below me there that says Request Prayer. You know, if you've got something you'd like for us to pray on, click that button. We can respond to that. I'll get an email right away, and we'll respond to that as soon as we can. We want to come around you and pray for you. Thank you for joining this online community, checking us out. I'm going to get out of the way and let you enjoy one of our worship songs. I'll be right back.
Oh, I've heard 1,000 stories of what they think you're like, but I've heard the tender whispers of love in the dead of night, and you tell me that you're pleased and that I'm never alone. You're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. Oh, and I've seen many searching for answers far and wide, but I know we're all searching for answers. Only you provide, 'cause you know just what we need before we say a word. You're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am. It's who I am. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways. You are perfect in all of your ways to us. Oh, is love so undeniable? I can hardly speak. Peace so unexplainable. I can hardly think as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still as you call me. Deeper still into love. Love, you're a good, good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are, and I'm loved by you. It's who I am. It's who I am.
So that was a pretty cool example of our worship that you're going to see when you come and experience Chase Oaks, whether at one of our physical buildings here at the Legacy campus, our Sloan Creek campus, our 544 campus. Hey, we even have a Spanish-speaking campus, our In Espanol campus, that meets at 1 o'clock here at the Legacy area. And so we want to invite you to those. But I also want to let you hear from Jeff and hear another kind of song that we do a lot here at Chase Oaks. So I'm going to play for you. We do songs a lot of times that you might call like regular songs. Some people might say they're secular songs, but you know what? All music is God's music. And whenever we find a song that would really fit well with Jeff's message, really kind of set the tone for what Jeff's about to talk about, a lot of times we'll play that in service to set that tone. You know, at Chase Oaks, our teaching is all about things that we can apply to our real life experiences. So why not kick it off with a song that people may be hearing in their real life experience on the radio as they're driving down the road. So I'm going to play you one of those songs, and then we'll roll into Jeff's message. Again, I want to personally invite you to either log in and join us on Sundays, 9:25, 11:10, or at one of our other buildings as well. And hey, check out the website. There's tons of cool buttons and things that you can check out to learn more about our church if that's what you're interested in. Enjoy the song, enjoy the message.
All my friends are heathens, take it slow. Wait for them to ask you who you know. Please don't make any sudden moves. You don't know the half of the abuse. All my friends are heathens, take it slow. Wait for them to ask you who you know. Please don't make any sudden moves. You don't know the half of the abuse. Welcome to the room of people who have rooms of people that they loved one day docked away. Just because we check the guns at the door doesn't mean our brains will change from hand grenades. You'll never know the psychopath sitting next to you. You're loving on the murderer sitting next to you. You'll think, how'd I get here sitting next to you? But after all I've said, please don't forget. All my friends are heathens, take it slow. Wait for them to ask you who you know. Please don't make any sudden moves. You don't know the half of the abuse. We don't deal with outsiders very well. They say newcomers have a certain smell. Yeah, trust issues not to mention. They say they can smell your intentions. You're loving on the freak show sitting next to you. You'll have some weird people sitting next to you. You'll think, how did I get here sitting next to you? But after all I've said, please don't forget. All my friends are heathens, take it slow. Wait for them to ask you who you know. Please don't make any sudden moves. You don't know the half of the abuse. All my friends are heathens, take it slow. Wait for them to ask you who you know. All my friends are heathens, take it slow. Wait for them to ask you who you know. Why'd you come? You knew you should have stayed. I tried to warn you just to stay away. And now they're outside ready to bust. It looks like you might be one of us.
Come as you are, not as you hope to be, pretend to be, or used to be. Just come. Empty-handed, heavy-hearted, open-minded, wherever you've been, whatever you think, however you hurt, as you are, to accept and to be accepted, to love and to be loved, because you don't need to change a thing to change your world.
All right, hello everybody. Good to see you guys. And I'm so glad you're here. Chase Oker, whether it's your first day, first time here checking it out, or you've been at Chase Oker for a long time. And I want to welcome those at our Legacy campus, but also those at our Sloan Creek campus up in Fairview, our campus in Wiley, our 544 campus, all those who are online right now and participating that way, or podcasting, our in Espanol campus. There's lots of ways we're a bunch of campuses all together as one. And really happy to have you as we are in this series called We Too, where we're looking at what God is calling us to be as a church, and the church is just us. And as we follow Christ, what is He calling us to do? And it's built around our DNA statements as a church. And the one we're talking about today is a really, really important one to understand if we're going to follow Jesus. And that is, we are all in the same boat. And we're going to dive into it, but this particular one, we're all in the same boat, is like an antidote to a disease that all of us have and none of us want. We have it latent in us, or sometimes we feed it and we fuel it, sometimes we suppress it, but it's devastating to the life that God wants for us. It's devastating to other people. It's devastating to environments like this. And that's the tricky thing, is because it actually tends to flourish in environments like this in church. And that's the ironic thing. It's kind of like a few years ago, 4 years ago now, our youngest son, Caleb, was in an accident. Caleb, if you know of him, he's kind of, a lot of people hear about all the stuff he does because he's an adventure kind of guy. So if things will go on Facebook and Instagram and all this crazy stuff. Well, he was rock climbing with some friends, and it started to rain. And this was in Oklahoma. Christy was there with him and some friends. And he fell about 30 feet, just a little bit under 30 feet. And it seems like every time we tell the story, it gets bigger, like 80 feet, 500 feet. He fell half a mile. It was amazing. But he did fall like just under 30 feet was the actual number, onto a rocky riverbed. And when Christy found him, he had been unconscious. He was lying in a pool of blood, and she had no idea what was going to happen. And it took a long time for paramedics to get there, but eventually they did. We were able to get him to the hospital. I was down here driving up there as fast as I could. And when we got him to the hospital, it was like, oh, good, because the hospital's where you go, right, to get better, and it's true. And they did make him better. And we were very thankful because he had no internal injuries. You could call it freakish, like they did, or you could call it just grace, however you look at it. But he did have a lot of lacerations, a lot of deep cuts, a concussion and a lot of deep cuts. And one just through his head all the way down to here that they had to sew up. And then most of the meat and skin on his thumb was gone. And then on his ankle was really the worst place, where it had peeled everything back and you could see all the bones in there. Do you want me to keep going with this? I'm enjoying this. I don't know if you... But... So they got him to the hospital to start dealing with those, but it took a long time. They were dealing with here, and so it took a long time to get to his foot and his ankle. And but they eventually, got him patched up. He's in the hospital a while, and then able to bring him down here where he could then recover, and it was all going to be great. We got him to the hospital. They patched him up. It's all good until we had him home for a couple days and realized that his ankle was not looking better. It was looking worse. Not better, but stranger. It was more and more inflamed, and then there was this weird red line slowly kind of going up his leg. And so we knew, obviously, there was a problem. So we took him to the doctor, and they immediately put him in the hospital because he had a staph infection that he had likely gotten in the hospital while that was open. And that was right when, I don't know if you remember this, but this girl in Atlanta, it was on the news a lot because she had, same thing had happened to, and they kept having to take different parts of her leg. And they were pretty sure that this was in the bone, and if so, then they would have to take his foot, and we'll see what more. And those were the conversations we were having. And people seemed to make sure we wanted to remember, like, have you heard about the girl in Atlanta? Like, yeah, we have. Thank you, though, But anyway, fortunately, they were able to find the right cocktail of antibiotics in the hospital to deal with it, and he would be fine. But how ironic that the one place you go to get better, and you do get better in one way, you actually catch a disease that could be even worse. And the same thing happens in a place like this, where those of us who want to connect to God and want to know God, and we do, maybe we begin a relationship with Jesus and things begin to change, and we begin to grow, and our perspective begins to change, and that's all good. We get better, and a lot of things get better. But as we get better, we can look at other people who maybe aren't, or in our minds think differently than we do, or they struggle with things that we used to, or struggle with things that we don't, and we start to elevate ourselves, and we end up catching a disease that you can catch around here called self-righteousness. Self-righteous superiority is the disease where we begin to elevate us and look down on our nose at others, kind of like, ooh. And we separate ourselves, or we condemn or judge or point or whatever, and like we're at a, and if you're, as you're listening to this right now, if you're thinking, oh yeah, I know people like that, I hate that. I know people like that are really bad about that. Guess what? You've got the disease, right? And me too. This is resonant in everybody. You don't have to be a Christ follower to get this disease. It's part of the human sinful condition. But it does tend to flourish in environments like this. Some people are like that toward Christians. So it's like you don't have to be a Christian to have this. But none of us want to be that person, right? We don't want to be that person. It's just so subtle, we don't even know it's happening. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to do what hospitals have to do, and that is they decontaminate themselves all the time. They disinfect themselves all the time. They can't ever get rid of all the bacteria and all the viruses, but they do everything they can to make it as virus-free and infection-free as they can, right? And that's what we're going to do. We're going to ask Jesus to help us today, and I believe he will. So turn with me to the book of Matthew. Matthew is the first book in the New Testament. The Bible's Old Testament, New Testament. And in the book of Matthew, it's a really cool story. You're going to be in Matthew chapter 9. And what I love about this story is that it's Matthew, who's one of Jesus' 12 disciples, who writes the book of Matthew, who tells the story of how Jesus chose him to be a disciple. And it's a cool story because Matthew would have been like if he was in high school, voted the least likely to be a disciple to a rabbi. Because rabbis, like Jesus, always chose the best of the best of the best. It was an honor to be asked to be a disciple from a rabbi if you were a young Jewish person 2,000 years ago in Jesus' day. I mean, it was like an honor, like maybe not quite this big, but like being admitted to the University of Alabama, something like that. You'd be like, wow, it's amazing. And that's the way people thought about it. And so when Jesus is going to choose Matthew, he was the last to be chosen as far as we know. He's already chosen either all the other or most of the other disciples. He's begun his ministry, begun his teaching, begun doing miracles. So he's like, people know, hey, this is not just the ordinary rabbi. And a lot of people are saying, hey, this is the Messiah. This is the one promised from God to change the world and all that. So it's a big deal who he chooses when he chooses Matthew. Because Matthew was can you do a drum roll for me? Very good. Tax collector. Now, you're like, well, big deal. I mean, yeah, the IRS may not be my favorite organization in the world, but, somebody's got to do it. I mean, why is that such a big deal? But in that culture, it was a big deal. The way the Roman Empire did things is that as they subjugated all these nations like Israel, where, Jesus was from, the Jewish people, they would recruit people in that culture to tax their own people. And you had to give a certain amount to Rome, and then you could keep the rest. And they were known to skim a lot off the top, known to be corrupt. At least that was a reputation, and I'm sure most of them were. We don't know about Matthew. We just don't know. But we know he's a tax collector. And because they represented this foreign nation and subjugating your own people, then everybody saw them as traitors. And in the nation of Israel, they were seen as especially sinful and evil and bad because of it. So with what Jesus is going to do, everybody looked down. You talk about self-righteous superiority, everybody looked down on tax collectors. But Jesus goes right up to him. As Jesus went on from there, he had done some miracle stuff. He saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth on the edge of the region of Galilee where people came in and they would tax people who were bringing in commercial goods. This was a place he tried to avoid, not go to. Follow me, Jesus told him. And Matthew got up and followed him. So immediately he's like, yeah, I'm in. I mean, you're the rabbi that a lot of people think's the Messiah that's doing all this cool stuff. I'm in. I don't know why you're choosing me, but I'm in. It's a little confusing, but I'm in. Now, we don't know how much they talked, like how much they interacted. I'm sure there was more to it than just this. In Matthew, maybe they had interacted before. And Matthew had come to know that this was no ordinary religious leader that he had known all his life. This was no ordinary rabbi. This wasn't like the Pharisees, the religious leaders, who looked down their nose at everybody and considered themselves righteous and everybody else sinners. And convince people that basically God hates you and you better get it together because he's mad at you and he's going to cream you. And Jesus was different. It's like, he's telling me God loves me and yet wants to change my life, but wants me to avoid judgment and wants me to know him forever. I mean, all this is going on. And he's thinking, man, this is amazing. So he does what is the only loving thing to do once we begin a relationship with Jesus and realize he accepts us as we are and then begins to change our life and grow us and use us, is we tell people about it that we love. I mean, why wouldn't we? And so that's what he does. He decides to throw a dinner party with all of his friends to meet Jesus. And that would have been an interesting group of friends because a tax collector, as a shunned group of people, only had fellow shunned groups of people to be their friends. They couldn't be friends with normal people. And so they had fellow tax collectors as their friends and sinners. Now, all of us are sinners, okay? But in that culture, you had the righteous people, kind of the middle of the road people who were trying to be more righteous, and then the sinners. And these were people like prostitutes and criminals and people with certain diseases that in bad theology, people thought you have that disease because you must have done something bad. So these were all people that most people looked at and went, ooh, that was his friends. Like the song we just heard, All My Friends Are Heathens, Take It Slow. Matthew could have sung that song. But the truth is we're all that way, right? We're all in the same boat. But that's his friend. So he throws a party. Now, Jesus, I would love to do a series sometime about just looking at the parties that Jesus went to. Jesus as the party guy or whatever, because we see him in the Bible go to different parties. And this is the first that we know of the sinner parties, like the outcast, the sinner parties that he went to. He went to multiple ones of those. But he also went to self-righteous Pharisee parties too. And it's interesting when you look at how he behaves as a party guest at each one. Because when he goes to the self-righteous Pharisee parties, he can't stand it and he disrupts it and ruins the party from their perspective. But when he goes to the sinner party, he doesn't sin. I'm not saying that. But when he goes to the sinner party, he's not that way at all. He just makes it a better party. It's really interesting to see. So anyway, this is a sinner party. And this is the first one he went to. He takes his disciples to this party with people, and they would have been just as shocked as anybody that they were going there. And so we read, while Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house at this party, many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. And the disciples would have been looking at each other like, I don't think we're supposed to be here. Like, look at the way these prostitutes are dressed and what they're talking about. This is not, what are we doing? And I don't even, I've been taught my whole life not to do this. And what are we doing? And I'm supposed to be separated from these people. And they're going to give me sinner cooties. And this is, all that's going on. And then the Pharisees, likely the next day, they knew about it. This is a small town. When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, why does your teacher do that? Why does your rabbi eat with tax collectors and sinners? Like the rest of us are trying to be righteous and trying to be godly and stay away from things like that and people like that. And your rabbi just hangs out and goes to the party and you went too. And why does he do that? And I don't think the disciples had a good answer. They didn't know Jesus well enough yet to know the answer and how you'd even respond to that. So Jesus overhears it and responds himself. On hearing this, Jesus said, it is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. But go and learn what this means. And then he quotes a Bible passage. It's actually quoted multiple times in the Old Testament, but Hosea 6:6 is one of those. I desire mercy, it's God talking, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners. There's a lot here. It's a really cool passage. But let's start with this little phrase, go and learn. Because that was actually an offensive thing for Jesus to say to these Pharisees, to these religious leaders, these Bible experts. Because it's what you would say as a rabbi. This is a common thing that rabbis would say to their pupils, to their disciples, or a teacher would say to their young students. They'd give you a verse like this and say, now go and think about it. Go and learn and come back and let's see if you can figure it out. It's kind of like if you go to your parents for homework help and you just want them to do it for you so you can play video games. And they say, no, I'm not going to do it for you, but I'll get you started. You go do it and then come back and we'll see if you get it right. And you say, no, just do it, you know. But you go and learn, right? And that's what he's doing. He's saying go and learn because you don't know this. You should, but you don't. Because what they had missed was with the heart of God, when he says, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, is what God is saying there is, I'm not primarily interested in sacrifices like the Old Testament, the whole religious system, the rituals and the all that in the religion. That's not my big thrill. That's not what I'm into. I'm into mercy. I'm into people. All that stuff makes it possible for people to connect to me. But you've made that the point. The point is people. The point is love. The point is mercy, not religion. And that you're so proud of because you feel like you're righteous and all that. And he says, in fact, it is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. Now he's talking to these people. How many people that he was talking to were spiritually sick? What percentage? 100%. Okay? The Pharisees just didn't think they were. They thought they were healthy, which is the worst disease you can have, self-righteousness. And then he says, I've not come to call the righteous, but sinners. How many of the people that Jesus was talking to, and I'll give you the answer, it's going to be 100%, so you get it right. What percentage of people that he was talking to were sinners? 100%. Yeah, you got it right. I knew you would. 100%. Yeah, I mean, we're all sinners, right? I mean, Jesus wasn't, but everybody else. And that's the point. He said, look, I'm calling people to come into my kingdom, not just to be one of my 12 disciples like Matthew, but Jesus he'd already been proclaiming this, that he was the one who was bringing about God's new way of life, God's kingdom way of life, that the sin is messed up and the world is messed up, but now the Messiah is here who's going to deliver us from all the foolishness and help us understand how to walk with God and reconnect us to God and begin to change this world. But he's saying the only people that can come into this are not the righteous people, but the sinners, not the healthy people, but the sick. And that would have completely flipped everything upside down for them. Because they were trying so hard to be perfect and trying so hard to be righteous and to do everything just right so they could be selected, so that they could come into the kingdom. They were expected to be elevated in the kingdom. Like you guys, the Pharisees, you're so good. We're going to, you're of course you're in. And Jesus is saying, no, you're not in. These people are in. The prostitutes and the sinners and it's the people who realize that we're all sinners in desperate need of God's grace, that come openly to God and say, God, I need you. Help me. Forgive me. Those are the people that get to live the kingdom life. The people who feel like they're already righteous because of their self-righteous works and they put themselves on a platform and look down at others and point at others, they can't come because God can't do anything with that. They can't come. Only sinners can come. Now, you may hear that again and think, yeah, I know people like that. But let's keep going, okay? Because this isn't all of us. And Jesus talked about this a lot because of it. One of the passages that he talked about it pretty directly is Matthew 7. And you may be familiar with this passage, especially the first one. Do not judge or you'll be judged. You heard that before? You know, people say that if you ever try to confront them with something. Well, you're not supposed to judge because Jesus said, do not judge, right? Or you'll be judged. And that's not what he's talking about. So we'll look at it. For in the same way you judge others, you'll be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Then he uses an illustration. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank, the 2x4, sticking out of your eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye. Let me tell you what's wrong with you. When all the time there's a plank in your own eye, you hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. This is a very easily misunderstood passage. So in a couple ways, so let's look at it. When it says, do not judge, or you too will be judged, there are people who say, well, if you correct them or you say, hey, I'm not sure this is right, or man, I think you should look at this, or, thinking, well, you're not supposed to judge me. That's what Jesus said. Don't judge. And that's not what he meant. I mean, other places, Jesus tells us if we love each other, that we need to confront each other in love. We need to go to the person one-on-one and just say, hey, there's a problem, there's an issue. We need to talk about it. I love you too much just to let you go down a trail that's destructive. Like, we need that. That's not what we're talking about. A better way to translate this, I think, to get the sense for it, is do not condemn, because that's what he's talking about. Do not condemn, or you too will be condemned. He's talking about a condemning attitude where we place ourselves, we sort of elevate ourselves as if we're somehow able to get on a platform above other people and point at them and say, well, you better, or you need to, or you're messed up, or let me tell you your problem. And it's that kind of judgy, condemnatory thing where we actually get a little thrill out of that too. And that's what he's talking about, which leads us to understand the speck versus the plank. Because you can read what he's saying with, so the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye, like when you have something in your eye and you're like, hey, can you help me? I think there's something in my eye. I can't, I can feel it. And you're like, oh, no, there's nothing there. No, look, help me, right? That's a little tiny thing is the fault in other people. Now, some of us are really good speck finders in other people. We can spot weaknesses in each other. I mean, isn't it amazing how easily you can see somebody else's problems, right? How clear we can see each other's problems. And Jesus is saying, yeah, there's a bigger problem than other people's problems, and that's our problem. And that's the plank in our eye. Now, what you can hear Jesus saying is, well, what he's doing is he's saying the plank in our eye is our sin, our problems. And what he's saying is, if you're going to condemn other people, you better deal with your own sin first, and then you can condemn other people. So he's giving us a lesson on how to be a good condemner. You deal with your own problems, and then you can condemn away. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is it's that spirit of condemnation itself that is the plank in our own eye. The self-righteousness is a much bigger problem than sin. It's a form of sin, but it's like a much, much bigger problem. We're so consumed with the sins and faults and messed upness of other people, and we don't realize as we elevate ourselves that actually it's our self-righteousness that is the much bigger problem that obscures our ability to have clarity. We can't see with a plank in our own eye. Now, as I've said, we all have this. This is not just for Christians. This is for every single person. There's something in our sin nature. I don't think God made us this way, but in our sin nature that just kind of needs to elevate ourselves somehow in various ways. We may know, yeah, we're below a lot of people in a lot of ways, but I got this one. That all of us tend to view ourselves or need to view ourselves, and psychologists point this out. There's even a name for it. It's called illusory superiority. The illusion of superiority, that we have to feel in some ways better than other people to elevate our own identity and kind of look down at other people. It's a part of, they would say part of human nature. Theologians would say part of sinful human nature. Now, they've done a lot of ways to illustrate this, a lot of studies to demonstrate this. One of them was a study of 830,000 high school students. 830,000, that's a big study. And the question they asked these 830,000 high school students is, compared to your peers, your fellow, high school students, are you above or below average in your ability to relate to other people? Like you as a relator, are you above or below average? Now, I know for some of us, it's been a while since we've been in school, so math is hard, but just, from a statistics perspective, what percentage of people are above average? Okay, above average is what? About 50%, right? So that would be the above average number. Guess how many of the 830,000 students, what percentage said they were below average? Just guess. 0. No joke. I mean, I'm not talking 0%. I mean, it was like 0 of the 830,000 said, I'm worse at relating than most people. Every single one of 830,000 said, oh yeah, I'm better than most. Well, then they asked, well then, what percentage would you place yourself in? 25% of the students placed themselves in the top 1%. Now, mathematically, that doesn't work, okay? So a bunch of them, right, are suffering from the illusion of superiority. But there's something in it. Now, some of you are like, yeah, but those are teenagers. They're all like that. And you teenagers right now are thinking, wait a minute. I mean, I showed up at church and I'm getting abused. Come on, I'm here. I could be somewhere else. And I'm for you. I'm an old youth pastor. Okay, so I'm going to help you out some because it's not about being a teenager. Let's talk about adults. Let's talk about smart adults. Like they did a study of, this is kind of a famous study they did of college professors. to demonstrate the same thing. Hundreds and hundreds of college professors, university professors around the country, and they asked them to rate themselves as a teacher, like as a professor. Are you above? Do you feel like you're above average or below average, like compared to your peers, as a professor in your teaching ability? Guess how many said they were above average? Guess what percent? Just guess. 94% said they were above average as a professor. Well, then, you think, well, that's a professor. Another group, because of that study, the Barna group that does a lot of surveys with churches, decided, hey, this would be fun. Let's do it with hundreds of pastors. So they did. And they asked hundreds of pastors who speak on a platform like I'm doing right now, of some kind. They said, are you above or below average in terms of your communication ability as a preacher, as a teacher, as a pastor? Guess what the percentage of was? It said, yeah, I'm above average. 90% of us said we're above average. And if you're like, well, where would you put yourself? And I'd be with the 90%. Because of illusory self, all right? There's something sick part of me that needs to feel like this. It's true of me. Well, most of us aren't pastors or professors. So let me use the last one is something that most of us can relate to in the room, and that is driving ability. So when they've done this survey with drivers, almost every driver places themselves in the top 25% of driving ability. Even those, because they asked follow-up questions, even those who had been hospitalized multiple times with accidents they caused, still place themselves, if people just weren't so slow, I wouldn't have hit them, that kind of stuff, right? In driving ability. And by the way, if you want to know what's real about your driving ability, ask your spouse or your parent or a great friend, right? Or don't. You won't like the answer, right? But illusory superiority. There's just part of us that it's sinful human nature, kind of the way we do things. And in fact, for me, and this is embarrassing to say, but when I was doing this message and looking at all this research and I wrote this down on a piece of paper, illusory superiority, this thought formed in my mind. I didn't say it out loud because I was by myself, but it formed clearly in my mind, and it was this. I think I'm better than most people at this, at not being this way. I really did. And as soon as the thought went out there, it was like, shoot, I wish I hadn't thought that, because I still think it's true, but now, Now, it's kind of, when it comes to driving ability or whatever, big deal. But when you and I bring this tendency into our relationship with God and into our relationship with other people, especially as it relates to spiritual things, then it becomes really, really dangerous. It becomes dangerous to everything that God wants for us. As Jesus said, you cannot live the kingdom life. You cannot live the life of joy, meaning, and significance I want for you. If we bring it into our relationship with God, self-righteousness, it means that we're going to base our relationship with God based on our performance, which either we feel bad about or good about, and that'll screw up our relationship with God. If we feel like we're doing great, self-righteous, then we won't. Basically, God can't do anything with us. We're just stuck. We're complacent. We're just stuck. It's only people who know, man, I'm messed up. And God, I don't deserve you, but I need you. And because of your grace, I need you to help me. And then God's like, okay, that I can work with. But he can't work with self-righteousness. He can work with sinners. He can't work with self-righteous. When we bring that into our relationship with other people, especially as it relates to spiritual things, think about how devastating that is to that family or that group or that church or that relationship or that person. As maybe we kind of exalt ourselves in our own mind above other people that, I can't touch you, I can't hang out with you, I can't, you're messed up, man. For whatever reason, maybe it's they're struggling with things that we used to struggle with and don't, or things that they struggle with things we don't, and we can't imagine how anybody could struggle with that. Or maybe somebody's addicted or dealing with sexual identity or has a thought that's different than us about politics or isn't as nuanced as we are about social things or whatever it is we do. And what we do in that process is basically convince people, you're too bad for God. Like God hates you. God doesn't want you. This party that we're part of, church, you know which kind of party it is? You think it's the sinner party or the self-righteous Pharisee party? It's supposed to be. Okay. It's a sinner party. It's not, when Jesus goes to a self-righteous Pharisee party, he blows up the party because that's like the worst kind of party. He goes to the sinner party, right? Because Jesus makes a great sinner party because he says, come as you are, let me change your life. He doesn't just leave us as sinners, right? It's not just, hey, I accept you, you don't have to. It's, hey, I love you and I accept you. Let's make it better. Let's get better. And that's the kind of party that we're called to call. Not a, ooh, you can't be here, but hey, if you're a sinner, man, come on. Because me too. We're all in the same boat. I mean, think about the millions of people around the country right now who really would love to connect with God and feel like the last place they could go is a church. I mean, that's millions of people. Think about how that grieves the heart of God, right? That's the ugliness of self-righteousness. As opposed to, yeah, of course you can come. God doesn't hate you. He loves you. And he loves you too much to keep it. I mean, he's not going to keep us like this. I mean, good grief. The hope's bigger than that. But he's going to love you no matter what. And he's going to be gracious along the way. So here's the kind of the antidote, okay, to this problem. The antiseptic, the antibiotic. This idea, we're all in the same boat. This is for our friendship circles, our families, our small groups, our church. We're all in the same boat. We're all on a journey of transformation. We're all screw-ups that God loves. And when we open up our life to him, he's in the process of transforming us. But we all have so far to go, we don't even have a clue how far it is. And we celebrate momentum over destination. You know, what can happen is we start focusing on destination points where people get to a certain amount of Bible knowledge or a certain amount of, I don't know, God changes our lives in certain ways, and we start feeling pretty good about ourselves, and that becomes a little perch to look down at other people. And that's so arbitrary. I mean, there's a bazillion things in our life. We don't know how messed up we are. And we get so proud of ourselves for a little thing. And rather than just, hey, God, this is cool, man. You're doing this in my life. That's awesome. But that's different than realizing, hey, it's not about destination. We won't arrive anywhere. Even Paul said, yeah, I haven't arrived. I didn't come close, and none of us will. But it is about momentum. And therefore, when we see God work in our own life, when we see God work in the life of somebody else, and God's pulling him toward himself, we should celebrate the heck out of that because that's God at work in somebody. You say, yeah, but they're so screwed up, like in this area. Big deal. We are too, right? And so let's celebrate momentum over destination and inspire through grace rather than shame. Meaning, rather than putting ourselves on a platform, even like me as a pastor on a platform, and like looking down and saying, you need to do this, you better do this. You know, you better. Instead, a grace-oriented environment that said, hey, we're all in the same boat. We're all just messed up people, and the only thing to rescue us is the grace of God, not our own performance, because that's not going to take us anywhere. And therefore, it's not a you better environment, but a me too environment. If you struggle, you know, if you're a struggler, if you're a sinner, if you really feel like a screw up, you know what? Me too. Me too. I mean, in the same way as a parent, you know, not to act like you've got it so together that your kids can't even relate to you and they know it's hypocritical anyway. Just say, hey, you screw up. I know, me too. But God loves screw ups. Now let's get better. Like let's help each other be on the journey to find more of Jesus and more of his better way. And let's help each other. But as a me too to me too, not as a you better, you know what I mean by that? Let me give an illustration, make it even more clear. So right now we're doing these man caves. And man caves are small groups of men that are getting together. And it's not like we selected leaders. And I love this. I love the man cave idea. Because really what we did is just say, hey, if you're a guy in the church, you got friends who are guys, and you talk about whatever you talk about. Maybe you talk about sports or some TV show or something or whatever, and that's kind of your video game. Whatever you talk about, whatever your thing is, that's great. That's fine. But what if you got together with a group of your friends and say, hey, let's also be intentional about our relationship with God? Like, let's figure out what it means to be a godly guy. That'd be cool to know and help each other on that journey. And so just get together with a group of your friends, and we'll provide the resources, and you lead it. So that's happening right now, a lot of those groups. So a couple weeks ago, and you may be here, this guy came up to me after one of the services. I hadn't met yet, young guy in our church, and let me know, hey, I'm new to this Christianity deal, but I really need you to pray for me because I'm really, really nervous. I was like, okay, help me understand how I can pray for you then. Like, what's going on? And he said, well, we're doing these man caves right now, and I talked to a group of my friends into leading a man cave. Like, I'm going to lead it. I'm going to be the leader, and I'm scared to death because I'm so unqualified to do something like this. And I was like, okay, well, I'll definitely pray for that. That's really cool you're doing that. But help me understand why you feel so unqualified. And he said, well, the reason I feel unqualified, he said, like today and in that week, this was a few weeks ago, I'd used a passage in the Bible from Ephesians 5:18 that says, do not get drunk with wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Spirit of God. Now, debauchery is one of those great words. Like, I don't know what it means, but it sounds terrible, right? Leads to debauchery. That must be bad. I have no idea what it means, but it must be bad, right? And a lot of people who drink too much think, yeah, I can relate to that. So anyway, so he said, well, you know that verse? He said, last night, I was a big debaucher. That's the way he said it. I've never heard that word that way, but it was awesome. I love the word. But he said, I was a big debaucher. And now, next week, I'm supposed to lead a man cave. And like, man, I'm messed up. I really need your prayer. I said, man, I will definitely pray for that. But let me help you out just a little bit on the qualification thing, because you might be perfectly qualified to lead your group. That's what I'm going to guess. Because said, here's who we're looking for to lead our groups, like man caves. We're looking for honest strugglers who are really on the journey. Now, there's two steps to that. One is, are you on the journey? Meaning, you're open to God working in your life. You're yielding more and more of yourself to Him. You're submitting to His better way. You're submitting to, obeying Him, what He says, and all that is the better way. And imperfectly, because we're all imperfect and we're going to screw up. But you're on the path, like you're on the journey. You want God to change you. You're, living in progressive obedience to Him and learning what that means. And He's like, yeah. And at the same time, you're willing to be on that journey an honest struggler, not trying to make yourself look better than you are, but being really honest about where you're actually at and where you screw up and all that. And you're willing to lead a group to say, hey, I'm screw up. I'm an honest struggler, but God is changing me and growing me, and let's be on the journey together. I said, are you willing to be that kind of leader? And he said, well, I can do that. Like, then you're perfect. Like, that's exactly what we're looking for. You're the best qualified person I know. Like, imagine if we chose somebody who felt like they were the expert and they were going to tell your friends how they should do everything because they've got it all going on. How do you think that would go? Well, that wouldn't work. Of course not, right? And I left that conversation thinking, man, that'd be fun to be part of that group. I would love to be part of that group. And that's what we're talking about. On the other side of that, catch this quote from a guy named Henry Nouwen, who's a really good writer. He's in heaven now, but really good writer. He who thinks that he is finished is finished. How true. Those who think they have arrived have lost their way. Those who think they've reached their goal have missed it. Those who think they are saints are demons. None of us want to be that, but it is easy to slip into self-righteousness for all of us, not for somebody else, for all of us. So here's what I want to do. I want us to ask God to disinfect our hearts on this one. And we're going to go to God in prayer, and what I'm asking is not easy. This is one of those sermons like, hey, Jeff was in a good mood today. It was kind of fun. This one's hard. And I know it's hard because it's been a hard week for me. God's been working in my heart. And honestly, going into this, I thought I was pretty good on this self-righteousness thing. I know that's ironic, but I did. And then it's just like, oh, ouch. Like even just think about our church. One of the ways God really bonked me is I start thinking about our church as a come as you are church and a non-judgy church and all that kind of stuff. And I start thinking about other churches that aren't so much that way and feeling really good about us and really bad about them. And then God's like, dummy, come on. Really? Really. Just how messed up is that? And realize, oh, God, sorry. Get this out of my heart. I don't want to be that kind of leader. I don't want to be that kind of person. So let's go to God with this. And again, let me just give you some thoughts, okay, of what it could be. It could be a particular sin struggle that you just so don't understand. It's like, ew. Maybe it's somebody with a sexual orientation that you just think, how could they be like that? I don't even get that. Or maybe it's somebody with a political view that is so different than yours. And you're thinking, how could anybody be that foolish? And I'm so glad I'm me and not them. I'm so glad I got it together. Or maybe it's somebody, as I said, who just is less nuanced than you feel like you are about social things. Or there's a million ways we do this. And to say, God, please get that out of my heart and mind. So I'm not sending out ooh, but I can love and seek to understand and reach out to and say, hey, let's get on the journey together and figure this out together. And to be parents who lead that way, to be friends who are friends that way, to be church leaders who lead that way. Let's bow our heads together. And I'll just get you to ask God yourself the bold question if you're brave enough to do it. And then just say, God, reveal to me what's hidden in my heart. Because this self-righteous thing is so subtle. And God, just help me know where I'm self-righteous and feel superior. And then once that starts, say, God, forgive me for that. Because I know it's not true. It's an illusion. There's just a sick part of me that needs to feel that. And God, I pray you would heal that and help me move toward just an authentic understanding of your grace. Not just for me, but for other people too. And Father, I pray that you would do this continually work in our hearts, that you would disinfect our hearts, our families, our church, our groups from self-righteous superiority that just kills everything good. And that you would help us move forward as a group of struggling sinners, all screw-ups that you love and want to transform and use to make a difference. We thank you that that's who you are. In Jesus' name, amen.